I have to talk for just a moment about punctuation because that is absolutely a big part of teaching syntax. Determining punctuation use is part of syntax. And I will remind you, I don't have to do this because you all know this, our kids read right through those punctuation marks or use them randomly in their writing. So we have to teach them explicitly about those punctuation marks. Trees, in the first example here, is possessive, right? In the second example, the word is plural because it's missing that apostrophe, and apostrophes are very challenging for kids. These are our sentence types, and we can teach our punctuation marks with when we teach those sentence types, and we teach them what the function of, in the interest of our functional grammar approach, what is the function of a period? It tells us to stop. What is the function of a question mark? It tells us that we're asking something, right? What's the function of an exclamation point, right? It shows surprise. So we can have these picture prompts when we're first teaching our students about these. But now I want to talk about phrasing and prosody because, as I said at the very beginning of this webinar, our students that have difficulty with reading fluency often have difficulty with the phrasing part. They're so busy and so focused on reading the word accurately that they are not able to phrase and read prosodically. And so are getting more for, what's the best way to say this? I've been talking for 2.5 hours, so I'm a little tongue-tied at this point. But we're going to get more bang for our buck when we use that syntax in our reading wheel, because we can teach prosody of reading fluency and explicitly teach about syntax. Just in terms of measuring prosody, we have the NAEP fluency scale, which I think is one of the best ways of determining what a student's prosody is, right? And it's, 4-point scale, not from non-fluent to fluent, but it has different scales within the scale. And one of them is phrasing. So we're going to think about the student's phrasing, and we have the scale from 1 to 4. What are we looking for? What are we listening for? And this quote from a great article that talks about reading fluency and phrasing says that fluency involves not only the word recognition ability, but also that semantic and syntactic knowledge that we've been talking about all morning. So that includes the punctuation marks that really tell us how to read the text. And this prosody is really important in building reading fluency. This is a definition of prosody by Kuhn and her colleagues. And what we want to think about when we think about oral reading fluency is that learners have opportunities to engage with connected texts. So yes, there's a place for reading word lists, etc., but it's extremely important that reading fluency practice includes reading connected texts. And an article that was written, it's in your reference section, about adolescent struggling readers, since many of you who are here today work with kids who are still struggling, and they're struggling for a variety of reasons, but one might be reading fluency. So we really do want to continue to work with these students on their fluency, but we're going to work on their phrase reading ability, their ability to chunk words into these meaningful word groups, because this ability becomes increasingly more important as the students get older. And why? Because the text they're reading gets increasingly more complex. And this particular study that looked at a number of adolescent struggling readers talked about the fact that this ability to read in phrases is correlated with students' syntactic awareness, and it actually accounts for more of the variance in their reading comprehension than their passage reading rate. Again, going back to my point, it's not how fast you read, it's really how prosodically you read, because it is a signal that students are actually making meaning. So what can we do to support students in this you know, this syntactic parsing, as I say here. We have to review these common phrasing patterns, the subject, the predicate, the phrases, the clauses that we've been talking about, and then have students practice with the text that you want them to read in their content classes, in their ELA classes. Don't just pick a random text, pick the text that you want them to be comprehending and working on. So this is just an example of that. And this, I mentioned this article by Scott and Balthazar. Again, it's an awesome, awesome article. And in it, the authors show this table for comprehension questions for later developing complex sentences. There's a lot on this slide. So for those of you who work with older students, it is important. English teachers, if you're an English teacher, you guys learn about syntax, right? For teaching high school kids, and you know all this terminology, you know a relative clause and an adverbial clause and an object complement clause. It's not so important that you know the exact definition, but just so that you see why these different later developing complex sentence structures are complicated and what to do about it. How can you address these in your older adolescent struggling readers?